Coming up on the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast, a new study shows there may be a difference between people who have sarcoidosis only in their heart versus those who have cardiac sarcoidosis and involvement in other organs. But which one is worse?
This is the Sarc Fighter podcast, living with sarcoidosis and other rare diseases. Here's your host, John Carlin.
Hello and welcome to episode 126 of the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast. I'm your host, John Carlin. I do the podcast because I want to help you know what's going on with you, to help you maybe have a sense of hope as you deal with this unpredictable disease, to tell you what's going on in the research sectors, and to tell you how our advocate, the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research, is moving forward on different fronts, and to just kind of keep you up to speed. Sometimes that's listening to another patient with sarcoidosis tell their story. Sometimes it's looking at the most recent research, which is what I'll be doing today. And I got to tell you that, speaking of that, the numbers are in from all of your participation in that. This is a mouthful. The externally led patient-focused drug development presentation to the FDA. And I make light of that because it's a lot of words, but it is a big deal. Externally led patient-focused drug development presentation. So basically, we did this presentation on October 28th of 2024, less than a month ago as I'm speaking. And so far, the number of people is about 350 from the Sarc community who either tuned in or participated in some way. And this was our chance as the sarcoidosis community to speak directly to the FDA. So all those big words aside, the FDA is listening, we're talking, and at the end of the day, the idea is that the FDA has a better understanding of the disease, the lack of medications, the impacts to our lives, how serious sarcoidosis can actually be, and now it's top of mind for them. And by the way, it's not too late. You still have a chance to participate. You can watch the entire segment or part of it, but there are some really interesting things, some details and some research that came out along the way. But it is about 5 hours long. I want to tell you that. So maybe you want to call it up on YouTube and slide along and see the parts you're interested in, the parts you're not. But this is where you still have a chance to make a difference, and that is you can still leave a comment, right? And those comments will all be taken into consideration after this presentation is distilled and turned into a white paper, which will be given to the FDA. So scientific paper for scientists to read. But among that paper will be all the comments. Within that paper will be all the comments that came in from the community. And you still have a chance to do that. And it's very easy because FSR has a link on their website. And I'll also put it in the show notes. It takes you directly to the program and the comment form. All right. So look for that in the show notes. Or if you want to bypass going into the show notes, just go to the FSR website and start searching around a little bit. You can use their search engine. It's great. And it'll get you there. So, and I would search for the externally led patient-focused drug development presentation, and that should get you right to it, okay? But this is important. It's our chance to tell the FDA how much we hate this disease, how few options we have once sarcoidosis shows up in our lives in terms of medical treatment. It's prednisone, it's methotrexate, it's Cellcept. Nothing other than prednisone is really on label. Atyre is getting very, very close, as I've updated you along the way with a new steroid-sparing drug that is in the final phases of clinical trials, and let's hope it passes muster as the company tries to clear these last few hurdles. But at any rate, even when that happens, we doubtless will need additional information to fight this disease. So let's keep it in front of the FDA. Let's make sure they know about sarcoidosis. Go ahead and leave a comment, even if you just want to tell them how it's affected your life. And the deadline to do that is December 8th of 2024. So it's coming up fast. All right. I was privileged to moderate that discussion along with Mary McGowan, the CEO of FSR. And it was a big deal. We were all in Northern Virginia, and we were in a television studio with a very accomplished production crew, and lots of pre-recorded comments from people in the sarcoidosis community, many of whom have been on this podcast, by the way, and it felt really good to be a part of that. But if you want to feel as good as I'm feeling, then go ahead and leave a comment, and let's continue to show the FDA how much it means to us. Now, I need to share a little bit of personal information. A lot has happened since the last episode, and I've got to admit that I took my eye off the ball because I'm uploading a day late. I really live by my mantra to put out a podcast every other Monday, and there have only been a couple of times when circumstances forced me to be late. And this is one of those times where I'm going to claim that I'm going to blame it on circumstances, and I'm going to offer, I'm not going to call it an excuse because I got to own it, right? But there are some reasons, and they're reasonably interesting. So, because a lot of people like to hear about what happens in the life of your local television news anchor, and that's my job, right? I'm the news anchor for the local NBC affiliate, which is WSLS 10 in Roanoke, Virginia, and I've been here for over 30 years. But I think I told you in the last episode that President-elect Donald Trump made a campaign stop here in Roanoke, or there's a little town right next to Roanoke called Salem, on the Saturday before Election Day. And I drew that assignment. It was a very, very long day. Started out interviewing people out in the crowd that, they didn't even let them in. Security was as tight as you can possibly imagine. So everybody is queued up in the parking lot. There's the total event was open to about 7,500 people inside the stadium. It's an indoor coliseum, basketball arena, if you will, but they also do things like rodeos and trade shows in there. But it's big, okay, relatively speaking. And so there was room for about 7,500 people, and they were all queued up out in the parking lot. So I'm out there early in the morning doing interviews with them, and everybody's wearing their MAGA hats and dressed in red, white, and blue, and it was quite an assembly of people. And my job was to capture that and to tell the story of everything that was going on. And then, of course, there were a lot of dignitaries right up to the governor of Virginia who were speaking. Well, all the speakers spoke, but Trump was running late from his previous rally, which was down in North Carolina, and we were actually tracking his jet. We saw it landed in Greensboro, and then he took some other means of transportation to get from Greensboro to Roanoke, which by plane is less than an hour. But and we didn't know what time he would be there, so it's about like a 2-hour wait. All the speakers are done, everybody's getting restless, and it's about 2 hours before Donald Trump comes and speaks. And then he eventually did, and there was drama unfolding. They've really got this down to a science. Every single place he goes, I'm sure they follow the same format, but the music is loud and the cameras are shaking because of the vibration from the speakers. But watching everything in person was really interesting. And my story, I don't think I told you this last time, but my story, we always put everything on our website at WSLS.com. And then we also have a YouTube channel for the TV station, and it got over 100,000 views. I'm pretty proud of that. Most of our stories will get like maybe 100 to 500 views. So for this one to get 100,000 views, and something happened, somebody picked it up and started redistributing it. It's not like it was the greatest story in the history of the world, but anyway, I'll put a link to it if you want to see my report from that day. But then, of course, the following Tuesday, we had the election itself. And I'm sure you can imagine that was a long day. And in addition to the presidential race, we had a very tightly contested mayoral race in Roanoke. So we had coverage going all night long. We did an online program, which was, imagine you're watching TV, but of course network, NBC, is in coverage of the presidential, so we offered to people locally, well, if you want to watch us unpack all of this as everything comes in, you can do so in real time with a live stream at WSLS.com, which we did, and I think a lot of people watched it. So we had some dignitaries and some guests, congressmen, that kind of thing, coming into the newsroom and to the studio, and we were all watching together as the results came in. We were sort of talking about, we had a legal expert come in and talk about what might happen with Donald Trump's cases if he were to win the election, because, at 8, 9 o'clock on election night, you don't know yet who will have won the election. The polls close in Virginia at 7 o'clock, but much later as the time zones change, and it's not the same for every state. Anyway, that's just, it was a long night. Election night was a long night, and there was a couple of days of pretty serious prep going into that. And then right behind the election, every year for more than 30 years now, I have emceed the annual Junior Achievement Banquet, where the organization honors the top people in business. It's their Business Hall of Fame induction ceremony. So they look at everybody who's done a great job in Roanoke or the surrounding regions over the years, and there's a big gala, and usually a couple of people will be inducted into the Business Hall of Fame, and then they've started adding a couple of local entrepreneurs who are people who are early on or midway through their careers who may be candidates for the Business Hall of Fame later on, but they're already highly successful people in one way or another. And so the whole idea is to recognize business people. And one of the things that I've done, in addition to emceeing the event, is I also will go out ahead of time and interview some of the inductees and help produce segments, video segments that are shown at the gala. And a couple of them actually are also shown on television, but that takes a lot of time. And so we got the election, and then 2 days after the election, we have this. This is a big event at the Hotel Roanoke here in town, which is a classic historic hotel. If you ever come to Roanoke, you have to stay at the Hotel Roanoke. It's absolutely gorgeous, and you will not be disappointed. But let's just say that this event is almost as taxing as election night. And then on the heels of that, I also agreed to be the speaker at the RISE lecture series at Virginia Tech on the topic of data and the media. My job at that point was to share how the media uses or often doesn't use data from scientists because it can be so technical that the audience can't follow it. So you take research, which we'll be talking about later on in this podcast, and you try and make it so you really find the gold nuggets in there, but not all the things that probably the researcher would like you to include. And I had to write an hour-long speech and develop a PowerPoint slide to go along with it. And I was trying to keep it somewhat humorous and light while still showing, how and why the media does what it does and why we have to do it. And I taught this for a long time at the college level, why we have to do it the way we do it so that you, the viewer, if you're watching the 6 o'clock news and everything's going on at home, you're not sitting there just glued with your eyes to the TV. Someone's making dinner, there's children running around, there's tweens wanting to do their homework, there's whatever other distractions are happening in your life while the news is on, right? And so we have to take that research and we have to take their research and present it in a way that the public will willingly and hopefully gladly consume the information so they feel like there's a takeaway. And I've got to tell you that I agreed to do this, and then for a month I had a pit in my stomach. It made me very nervous because I wasn't speaking to students. I was speaking to faculty, to scientists. And these people, any one of them, really is the smartest person in the room. And I'm no scholar, right? And in fact, when they invited me, I initially wrote back to them and said they must be inviting the wrong person because I had no experience in the field of research or science or anything. And they quickly got back to me and assured me, no, it's you that we want. And they thought it was funny that I didn't believe I was the person from whom they wanted to hear. I'll say that properly, because I'm talking about academics. But anyway, I was nervous. I had to write an hour-long speech and develop the PowerPoint that goes with it, and I was just thought maybe I was in a little bit over my head, but it went well. Even though but it took a lot of time. It really did, and I worked on that speech off and on for the better part of 2 weeks, kind of diving into my office whenever I could to see if I couldn't develop another series of thoughts that would be relevant and pertinent. So, and then for good measure, I actually went to the Virginia Tech football game a couple of Saturdays ago with my 3 sons, who gave me the tickets for Father's Day back in June. And had the opportunity to see them get drubbed by Clemson. It was a long day. It was a long day for Hokie fans. But another full day. We had the house full of grandkids because we were all together to go to the game. And so all of this is to say, yes, I took my eye off the ball. I'm mad at myself for missing my deadline to upload yesterday, but I hope that you will understand. One more thing. I was trying to fix our carpet cleaner on Saturday. The way it works is you push it forward and it puts steamy solution into the carpet. You pull the thing backward and it sucks up the water so your carpet isn't wet for days. So forward, steamy solution, backward, it picks up the water. Well, for whatever reason, when you pulled it backward, it wasn't any longer picking up the water. So it was broken, and we have dogs, and our carpets need to be cleaned more than vacuumed fairly often. And so I told my wife, all right, let me go down and see if I can take this thing apart and find out what's going on. So I did, and lo and behold, I found this valve that appeared to be stuck. And I took it's just a spring-loaded valve, so all I had to do was push it down, and I thought that might fix the problem. So I got a screwdriver and I'm looking in there, so I poke it in the right place. I push the valve down and it immediately ejects some kind of soapy, dirty solution directly into my eyes. And I spent a good part of Saturday only being able to see things that were blurry. We went to the pharmacy and we bought every kind of eye wash that you can possibly imagine. I took a shower. I opened my eyes underwater. I did everything I could do to get this stuff out of my eyes. But I will say that this past Saturday was a total loss because couldn't see that well, and it literally felt like someone threw a bucket of sand in my eyes. Woke up Sunday and I was feeling much better. But I lost another day. So there. Whew, got that off my chest. I don't know if that was interesting or if it's just good for me to complain and explain and proffer my excuse as to why I missed my deadline. But that's what's been going on. Now, I do want to tell you, I'm very excited. I have an interview scheduled for later this week with a Sarc patient in New Zealand, which will be cool. So we'll do the interview here on Friday afternoon, and it will already be Saturday morning in New Zealand. But that is, and that was the best sort of compromise we could come to when I could fit it into my schedule, and she was not going to be up against something with her work or her family or something like that. So I think she'll actually be doing the interview at something like 6 a.m. But at any rate, so that's coming up, and that'll be in the next episode as long as everything goes according to plan. But I do want to tell you that this is a great time to contact me if you've ever wanted to be on this podcast. I need to line up some guests to get through the holidays. Thanksgiving is coming up quickly, and then right on the heels of that will be Christmas and New Year's. So please reach out to me, carlinagency@gmail.com, carlinagency@gmail.com, and let me know if you'd like to be on the podcast. We'd love to hear your story. So we'll have some 2 new pieces of research that I want to share with you, and that's coming up next here on the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast.
I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling.
Hi, I hope you're enjoying the Sarc Fighter podcast. You may be wondering, what can I do to help? How can I be a part of the sarcoidosis solution? It's simple. Make a donation to KISS, Kick In to Stop Sarcoidosis. 100% of the money goes to the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research. Look for a link in the show notes of the Sarc Fighter podcast. Welcome back to the FSR Sarc Fighter podcast. I want to talk about cardiac sarcoidosis, sarcoidosis of the heart, because there's a new study from Japan that's been reported out by Sarcoidosis News and written by Lindsay Shapiro, PhD. This study is a little bit surprising because it showed that potentially people who have sarcoidosis in their heart but not in other organs have poorer outcomes than people who have cardiac sarcoidosis plus other organ involvement. Now, I would think, the more places that you have sarcoidosis in your body, the worse off you are, right? Well, this study caused researchers to reach some new conclusions about cardiac sarcoidosis maybe being in some sort of a unique form when it's in the heart only, but not in other organs such as the lungs, the eyes, the skin, the spleen, all the other places, neurosarcoidosis. When it's only in the heart, it might be more serious. Now, I'm oversimplifying that here in order to make it understandable for the layperson, people like me, right? And this is kind of the topic of what I was saying to the researchers at Virginia Tech with my speech. You've got these highly technical studies that come out, and if you just look at these studies and just present these to people, it's not always something that's easily consumed. But I'm going to read some of the statements from Lindsay's article here from Sarcoidosis News. And it says, among cardiac sarcoidosis patients treated with immunosuppressants, those with heart involvement alone can have poorer clinical outcomes than those whose sarcoidosis affects other organs along with the heart, according to a small study. Now it continues, despite showing less heart inflammation before starting treatment, people with isolated CS, which means in the heart only, experienced higher rates of major cardiac events than those with more widespread disease known as systemic sarcoidosis with cardiac involvement. All right, so that pretty much is the scientific way of saying what I just said before I started reading here. Going on, researchers believe the findings demonstrate that isolated cardiac sarcoidosis may be a distinct condition that requires its own optimized treatment regimen. A team of scientists in Japan examined clinical data of patients treated with immunosuppressants at a single Japanese hospital, 21 with isolated CS in the heart only, and 36 with systemic CS, cardiac sarcoidosis, so the heart plus other organs. Among those with systemic cardiac sarcoidosis, the most commonly affected organs outside the heart were the lungs, 92%, followed by the eyes, 56%, and the skin, 17%. Patients with isolated CS were significantly younger than those with systemic CS, which I think is interesting. Nearly all patients were treated with prednisone as a first-line immunosuppressive treatment, while 2 people with the isolated CS received methotrexate. Some patients given prednisone also received second-line treatment with other immunosuppressants, including methotrexate, which I've taken, azathioprine, sold as Imuran, which I still take, and tacrolimus or Cellcept. Okay? So those are the drugs that we all talk about. They're probably familiar to 90% of this audience. The study continues. Over a median follow-up of nearly 4 years, a significantly higher proportion of isolated CS patients experienced a major heart event, including cardiac death, hospitalization for heart failure, or a fatal ventricular arrhythmia compared with systemic CS patients, 52% versus 17%. Ventricular arrhythmia refers to abnormal heartbeats originating in the heart's lower chambers. Researchers hypothesized that this prognosis difference could be explained by a few different factors. The one they thought most likely is that isolated cardiac sarcoidosis has different underlying disease mechanisms and is a distinct condition from systemic CS. This might mean that isolated CS patients require a different therapeutic approach. Quote, conventional immunosuppressive therapy for systemic CS might be inadequate for patients with ICS, the isolated in the heart only cardiac sarcoidosis, the scientists wrote. Further investigations are required in order to establish optimal treatment for isolated cardiac sarcoidosis. So those are all quotes. I skimmed through the study and pulled the parts that I thought could be read and could be understood by all of us. So the takeaways are that more study is needed, but this does shine a light on a whole new area of research in sarcoidosis, at least that I'm aware of. So I'm glad the medical community is looking at new ways to treat the disease. And for heart patients, we now have at least the thought that if it's only in the heart, doctors need to look at additional treatment options and pay particular attention to that condition. Also, of course, if you're listening and you're a cardiac patient, you need to bring this study to the attention of your care team, because if I'm reading this correctly, it sounds like it starts out looking like it's not as bad as systemic, but then the outcomes are much worse. So let's keep that in mind. Another piece of information from FSR that I want to pass along. FSR is excited to share a significant step forward for equitable access to clinical trials. On November 8th, 2024, the U.S. Department of Labor issued FSR a letter of confirmation ensuring that employees eligible under the Family and Medical Leave Act, FMLA, can use their benefits to participate in clinical trials for serious health conditions or support loved ones in doing so. This ensures job-protected leave and continued health coverage, empowering people to seek potentially life-changing treatments. So in that letter, in direct response to FSR, the Department of Labor clarified these following bullet points. There's 5 of them, and again, I'm going to read them to you. Employees who meet all other requirements of FMLA may access FMLA benefits for participation in clinical trials or the clinical trials of those for whom they serve as a caregiver. The term treatment includes clinical trials and treatments that may or may not be effective regardless of whether it is new, experimental, or a placebo. So you might sign up for the clinical trial, they might be giving you a placebo instead of the drug, but you're still covered. All right. The third bullet point, as long as this is part of the supported management of a serious illness and is not an elective procedure such as plastic surgery, it does not matter that the patient's participation is voluntary. Okay, so if you sign up for this, you can do it and you should get FMLA. The fourth bullet point, employers may still require appropriate documentation before issuing access to the leave as laid out in FMLA, but will not require that they indicate if they are on therapy or placebo, as this will not likely be revealed until after the time at which the requested leave time would expire, because you don't know if you're on the placebo or not, right? And then the fifth bullet point, employers may only verify that an employee has serious health conditions requiring treatment by a provider when responding to the leave request. So that fifth bullet point means you can tell them you have a serious health condition, but you're not required to tell them all the gritty details of your sarcoidosis if you don't want to, because you're protected there, right? And then FSR writes that we are deeply grateful for this decision, which will improve participation in clinical trials for all diseases, will align workplace policies with FMLA, and it will ensure that patients can pursue vital treatments without fear of losing their jobs or their benefits, right? So One of the big things that we talked about when we were talking to the FDA with our patient-led, our externally led patient-focused drug development presentation, one of the things we talked about a lot was how difficult it is to get sarcoidosis patients in particular into clinical trials. And this, from the FDA, makes it much easier now for you to rest easy and to know that you will be able to do this if you want to participate without fear of losing your job or your benefits. So good job, FSR. Thank you to the Department of Labor for that memo, and let's all keep that in our back pockets as we move forward. All right, again, I want to remind you this is a great time to contact me if you would like to share your story on the podcast. It's carlinagency@gmail.com, and I'm always open to emails, whether you just want to talk about whether you enjoy the podcast, if you have an idea for the podcast, if I've misspoken in some way, call me out. But if you want to be on the podcast, that's the way to contact me, is via email. And so please do. I am booking people right now through the end of the year. I hope you have a good Thanksgiving. Let's be thankful for the strides that are being made that we cited today in fighting sarcoidosis. The official Sarc Fighter song called Zombie by Mark Steyer and his band the White Hot Lizards is going. The entire song is going to play at the end of today's podcast. It's catchy, I'm going to warn you. And you can hear Mark's story, the story behind the lyrics, in a couple of episodes, way back in episode 12. And he talked about what made him want to write the song. And then more recently, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the episode number off the top of my head, but there's a link in the show notes. Mark came back on to talk about how Sarc is continuing to kind of be a pain in his butt. And so that is also out there. But again, thanks to Mark so much. I think the song really helps round out this podcast. As I tell you, I normally release every other Monday. I'm a day late today. I apologize. As I'm speaking today, my trusty dog Dougal is curled up in my office, as is my number 2 dog now, Shandy, who is a little over a year old and can be trusted to not be watched all the time without chewing up the bed or the couch. She is also in my office, so I have 2 dogs in the office today, and man, I just love it in my cozy place here. The backstory to the founding for the Foundation for Sarcoidosis Research is episode 11 with Andrea and Redding Wilson. Please follow me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Peloton. My cycling blog, Carlin the Cyclist, has a section called Cycling with Sarcoidosis. If you're new here, you're just trying to figure out what Sarc is, go back and listen to episode 2 with Dr. Simon Hart, and my story is episode 1. Once again, please send me an email. I'd love to hear from you. It's in the show notes, carlinagency@gmail.com. Until next time, keep fighting.
If I had a breath to breathe, I feel like a zombie, just feeding and stumbling. Learn to suffer, you feel pain someday. Learn endurance, your strength will fade away. Dead man walking, trying to keep up the pace. Dead man walking, counting down his days. And I don't know what will come. Look for silver linings, but still I find none. There was potential, slipping gone. It feels torrential, but I'm holding on. I'm holding on. I'm holding life. It's not the why, but the how that plagues my mind. A new perspective, appreciate what you've got. We're dead men walking, in an instant it could be gone. And I don't know what will come. Look for silver linings, but still I find none. There was potential, slipping gone. It feels torrential, but I'm holding on. I'm holding on. I'm holding on. The fear I fight every single night. Whoa, I'm still upright. Wherever there is happiness, fight to be there too. And wherever there are friendly smiles, try hard to smile too. And wherever there is sunshine, don't let fear darken you.